100 years after his death, Liverpool cotton merchant James Maybrick shot into the headlines when a diary emerged, supposedly written by him, detailing his criminal life as Jack the Ripper. The document was first brought to light by Michael Barrett, a Liverpool scrap metal dealer. Barrett's story of how he came to be in possession of it was bizarre, claiming that it had been given to him in a bar by a friend. In any case, the diary was made into a book that was published in 1993 to widespread derision. A few Ripper buffs were open-minded, but attention turned to the testing of the original document. Chromatography revealed that the ink used was commercially available at the time of the killings. The notebook itself was Victorian, though it was suspicious that 20 pages at the front had been torn out. The handwriting style was said to be more 20th century than 19th. In January 1995, Barrett swore an affidavit that he had, in fact, written the diary himself. Almost immediately, he withdrew the affidavit. To this day, some claim that the diary may be genuine, although the vast majority of Ripper experts are convinced that it's a hoax. Even if we were to assume that the diary is not genuine, which is not 100% certain, why would the hoaxers choose a long-forgotten Liverpool cotton merchant as its subject? Is there any evidence that Maybrick was ever suspected, or had any involvement in the Whitechapel murders? According to the diary, Maybrick killed prostitutes in Whitechapel because of rage at his wife. She had taken a lover, who she had been seen with in an area of Liverpool that was also known as Whitechapel. Whilst this seems a rather thin and convenient link, his wife did have an affair. Maybrick's marriage to her was rocky to say the least. According to records, he did blacken her eye on at least one occasion. Violence against women was not beyond him. He was also addicted to arsenic following a bout with malaria in the US, a situation which reportedly exacerbated an already fiery temper. As far as Whitechapel in London goes, Maybrick was familiar with it, having lived in the East End in the past. As a cotton merchant, he travelled very often from Liverpool to the capital. The fact that he spent so much time doing so is frustrating. No one seems to know where he was on the dates of the murders, and while this doesn't rule him out, nor does it rule him in. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing. And please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. During the investigation into another suspect, Francis Tumblety, the story of the Batty Street lodger came to light. Newspaper articles of the time depicted a man who fled shortly after one of the murders, leaving behind bloody clothes. The man was said to be American and had arrived in London from Liverpool. Whilst the connection to Liverpool is intriguing, the American part seemed to rule Maybrick out. And yet, Maybrick had spent several years living in the US before the murders. Could he have been mistaken by the locals for an American? Another piece of evidence that possibly fingered Maybrick was a crime scene photo at the murder site of Mary Kelly, the last generally accepted Ripper victim. Scrawled on the wall of her room were the initials FM, written in the victim's blood. After Maybrick's emergence as a suspect, some Ripperologists immediately speculated that the FM represented Florence Maybrick, James's wife. This is certainly well worth considering, but could just as easily stand for something else. Less than 6 months after the final murder, Maybrick was dead, Florence Maybrick was initially convicted of his murder by poisoning at a trial which received heavy criticism for a lack of impartiality. After much public sympathy and revelations that Maybrick had been self-medicating with dangerous drugs, she was eventually released in 1904. All that aside, Maybrick's death does fit the timeline for a murderer who stopped because they were unable to carry on. Was he Jack the Ripper? As with all other suspects, there's very little to connect him with the case, or if there was, the passage of time has destroyed it. Unlike the others, we have an alleged confession. It is more likely a forgery than genuine, but no one has yet proved that beyond question. In June 1993, another intriguing piece of alleged evidence surfaced. A collector named Albert Johnson purchased an antique gold watch, on the inside of which he found scratched the initials of Jack the Ripper's 5 victims, together with the signature, J. Maybrick, and the words, I am Jack. Skeptics were suspicious of the sudden appearance of the watch. Experts at the University of Manchester and Bristol University concluded that the markings were older than subsequent natural scratches. While not dating the markings conclusively, they did say they were many tens of years old. Their conclusions have been disputed, but not disproved. Maybrick divides Ripper scholars fiercely, and has more detractors than supporters. It may be that the diary that was supposed to prove his guilt weighs more heavily against him than anything else. But there is just enough there to make him a fascinating suspect. Until it has been conclusively proved that the tangible items he supposedly left behind are indeed hoaxes, we simply cannot rule out that the madman who slashed through Whitechapel in the late summer and autumn of 1888 was indeed James Maybrick.